us Chuma Nwokolo, a lawyer and proponent of that whistleblowing act for anyone who is able to give information leading to the conviction of looters, those who stolen public fund. Chuma, good morning.
Good morning, Tobi. How are you doing?
Good morning. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Bribe Nwokolo, let us go straight into this. You have been championing something like this for some time now. How do you feel, first, that this is coming from the federal government itself, from the presidency, which has been championing the anti-corruption war?
Well, on the positive side, I think it's good to see that the government is open to new ideas, that they are thinking outside the box, as it were. So it is a good thing that they are looking at the protection of whistleblowers, which is one thing that that has always been a problem towards getting enough information to prosecute looters of the treasury. The original bill that was proposed, they simply said they will reward. Now they are being quite specific, and they're talking about a percentage of between 2.5% and 5% of whatever is recovered. But on the more realistic side, if you want to look at the details of the law, there are things like when they are talking in terms of the conditions under which this money can be paid, things like the information that the government could not otherwise have got. So this imports a lot of gray areas, because how do you know the information that the government would not otherwise have got? After all, government sometimes has something in front of it and never acts on it. So I think that what will be more relevant is to simply have a pot of money that is there, and then to have something like a judicial process at the end of any recovery to determine, what should be, who should get it, because sometimes you have information coming in at the same time. But if I want to look more generally at the provision itself, I have to observe that in itself will not do the magic. Because if you're looking at just bringing information to the government, what does the government do with the information when it gets there? Remember that the real problem with corruption is that the corrupt people are actually in government, and they are the ones that you give this information to. So it is naive to expect that just by getting a wonderful whistleblowing law, you will suddenly have a transformation in how anti-corruption is prosecuted. And that's the difference between this law and the Bribe Code law, which we are proposing. The Bribe Code law, apart from providing for 1% of recoveries to the whistleblower, it also does two main things. The first is that it changes the penalty for corruption. Right now you hear the president saying things like, well, they will make the people bring back some of the money. And if people are bringing back some of the money, it means they are criminals. And so it means that if I want $1 billion naira, I steal 10 billion.
That they are guilty.
Yes, if I want $1 billion naira, I steal 10 billion. I'm begged to return some of the money, and then I'm free. Now that is a bad recipe for any anti-corruption program. So the thing is to make the penalty for serious corruption so serious that nobody tries it in his right senses. And that's what the Bribe Code does. It says that if you use your private company to commit serious corruption, that company will be liquidated and all its assets will be transferred to the National Reserve. And then, of course, a percentage, 1% of it goes to the whistleblower. That is what the Bribe Code suggests. The second thing is that if an individual is involved with that company in the prosecution of corruption, then all his assets, that's total assets forfeiture, all his assets, which means that before anybody ventures into this thing about stealing $1 billion so I can keep $1 billion, be ready to lose everything you have, not just what you stole. And so if we have it in our law books, it means that from the day it comes into the law books, all corruption will be transformed. Anybody going into it has to be a certified lunatic. And that is when things will begin to change. But again, that in itself will not transform our anti-corruption program. What will be important is that the third aspect of it is competitive prosecution. Right now, the law of Nigeria says that if there is anything, whether in EFCC or wherever, being prosecuted, a single telephone call and a single letter will end that prosecution. Which means all I need to be a seriously corrupt person is to be connected to every government in power. And there are some people who are like that. They are never in any political party. They are simply friends to people in power. So they have a permanent immunity against prosecution. Because don't forget that this whistleblowing law says that it is when you recover that you get a percentage. Which means that any Nigerian who wants to whistleblow has to first of all check, this person I'm about to report, is he related to the party in power? Is he related to the government in power?
Is it connected?
If he is connected to the family in power, the friends of the people in power, you're wasting your time. Not only that, you will be victimized, whatever the law says. Because the people who will trigger the protection are in the government, and they are the people you are reporting.
Well, that takes me to this question. Whistleblowing in itself could be good.
Yes.
It could be a way to solve some of this problem. But with the peculiarity of our system, Nigeria, which some you just highlighted, how do you think that whistleblowing thing itself will function? With the fear, with the scare, with all these stumblings and roadblocks you have mentioned, do we really need that at itself at all?
We absolutely need it. But we need it in tandem with other things. Now, for instance, you're talking about fear, and it is true. People have a right to be afraid. But the thing is, we are so afraid in this country that nobody even, first of all, corruption is going to kill you. If you analyze the deaths in this country, you find out that a majority of them come from corruption. Whether you are dying on the road because the road has not been tied because somebody stole the money, or you die in a hospital from a simple injection because somebody stole the budget for the healthcare, it is corruption that will kill you. So why are you afraid of doing the simple thing that will protect the country? That is what I don't understand. But beyond that, we do need a whistleblower protection law. The Bribe Code's version of it also allows companies to set up as whistleblowing companies, which means if you're a coward and you're afraid to come out with the information you have, you can sell it to a company which will submit it to government.
Wow,
Now,
think
yes.
the CAC will register under what?
Of course, you can have investigation. You can have investigative companies, and the bottom line is that if the law provides it, there's nothing illegal about it. Now, don't forget that Nigeria is all about privatization and competition. Now, the third aspect of the Bribe Code, which I was about to mention, which is relevant to what you're asking, is competitive enforcement. I was saying that if a company, if a member of government can simply pull out his whistle and blow it and end everything you're doing as a whistleblower, because he cancels the prosecution immediately, and that's the end of it. You can't ask questions. That's the law in Nigeria now. With the Bribe Code enforced, what will happen is that
prosecute,
precisely, you're on the same page with me. Now, what will happen with the Bribe Code is that you have 37 attorney generals who can validly file that action, so that there is no single Nigerian who can have the connections in 37 states that will be able to terminate a prosecution, especially since any state that carries that prosecution through will be entitled to having all those assets in its internally generated revenue. So you are bringing the power of privatization by privatized whistleblower and competition by competitive enforcement coming together with whistleblowing, and that is what will transform our anti-corruption program.
Chima, I've heard this argument by some people that this is a lazy man's way of solving corruption. Some like that, you just said it becomes a business.
Yes.
You register a business and what you do is whistleblowing. That rather than go into this, why don't you strengthen the institutions that pursue these corrupt people, FCC, ICPC, the laws and other things? Why don't you look at that direction?
Well, now we have a phallocentric theory of institutions, which means that the institutions are out to basically screw people. So all you need to do is you have things like captive institutions. An institution could be captive, could be made captive by either one ethnic group or one social class or one political party, and then all it's doing is looking for scapegoats. So strengthening institutions in the absence of a system like the Bribe Code is also corruption, because you are strengthening an institution that has only been managed by one ethnic group, which means it's totally focused on other ethnic groups. So what we need is a system like the Bribe Code.
I hope you are not thinking in the same direction of those who think or who are complaining that EFCC so far.
If you talk about EFCC, you are being very narrow. I'm talking about all over the institutions of Nigeria. There are some institutions that have been captive, either by social classes, political parties, or even friends networks. So if I'm the Director General, I appoint all my friends as deputy directors, which means that for the next 30 years, all the institutions, none of them can touch whatever I've done as the Director General. So basically what I'm talking about is having a system whereby no matter who you are, no matter how long you have held a particular institution captive, No matter how many people you've planted to succeed you, anybody from any part of the country who discovers a serious act of corruption can take action. And that is the only thing that brings the fear of corruption into Nigeria. Right now, if you're an ethical company that is doing business with government, you cannot survive if you are not prepared to, to give something out. But with the bribe code, if you are a corrupt company doing business with government, you cannot survive. And that is the future we should look for in Nigeria.
Okay, good. We are trying to look at the future. One thing I'm particularly worried or concerned about is the issue of confidentiality.
Yes.
Going by the peculiar nature of Nigeria and the issue of security of Nigerians themselves. How do we guarantee confidentiality when you've already put a caveat that you have to bear 5%?
Yeah, that's the bottom line.
Up to almost 5%.
Precisely, that's the bottom line.
Of the recovered goods.
Yeah.
How do you do that? By still protecting the...
Yes,
the
the minister did say that. The minister of finance did say that confidentiality will be protected, but that is impossible. If I'm going to get 5% of, I can't write they can't write anonymous on the check.
Yes.
I have to identify myself, give you my address, give you my contact details,
and even prove that I was the one that provided
precisely.
that.
Now, once I do that, and possibly even show a chain of knowledge that this is how I got the information. So I didn't just So now, once I do that, I'm exposed. Now I now have to trust the person I'm exposing myself to. Now, if the complainants are in government, for instance, I could be complaining about corruption in the EFCC, and you ask me to submit this to a website controlled by the EFCC. That is problematic.
Or even against the Minister of Finance.
Whatever, precisely. Now, there is the definition of corruption in political corruption in Nigeria is that the people you expect to prosecute you, to prosecute corruption, are the ones you're accusing of being corrupt. And so once you get to that dangerous aspect of, okay, you are going to take serious action against these people, it means that once you start whistleblowing, you need to write your will before you do that. Which is why the version of the Bribe Code looks at this problem and says that, okay, for instance, look at institutions like newspapers, which have for decades and centuries been in the business of whistleblowing. And they have been practiced in the way of being able to defend and protect their sources. There are even Supreme Court decisions that give them a limited degree of protection of their sources. Now, if you now have institutions like that, also people that register specifically for it's a para business, if you like, of whistleblowing, they can offer a better degree of protection for their whistleblowers, their real human whistleblowers, than the government can offer, because it is the government that you are accusing of being corrupt. Now, if you have that system whereby you have an institution outside government that is in the business of, one, looking for whistleblowers, two, protecting their identity, you now find out that they can better manage this risk as a company. They can better manage the risk of, because don't forget, when you say you protect whistleblowers, you cannot protect them against themselves. If I am on my own now driving to a hotel for an evening relaxation, and I'm a whistleblower, I don't need to have been guilty of a serious act of corruption to be victimized. It could be that every 30 minutes a policeman will stop me and ask me 50 questions. It could be that every time my children step out of the house, they're interrogated over everything. That in itself is harassment. It's not illegal, but you cannot prove. So what I'm trying to say is that victimization takes different forms. So it is essential that if we are serious about corruption, we make it convenient for people who have information to actually put it forward. Because people will ask you, what's the good of 50% of loot if I don't live to enjoy it?
Now, this takes us to another technical aspect of it all, when we talk about whistleblowing, and that is going online, creating a portal where you can submit your findings or reports or whatever it is. How foolproof is an online portal when even government-owned institutions or agencies' websites are being hacked?
Yes, I must say that there is limited security, but in this day and age, if we're serious about it, it is the best avenue that you can use. What is important is that we should design such a website in such a way that no single person can shut it down. In other words, I as an officer cannot say, well, my best friend has just been reported. I'm going to, not take action on this. I'm going to kill this particular report. which is why under the Bribe Code version, it is managed by two agencies. And of course, we can add more into the soup. You have the ICPC and the EFCC, which can, manage, which can receive information at the same time. So no single person can shut down a particular complaint and say, well, this was never submitted, or this was submitted by XYZ. So what is important is, and of course, once it passes through its immediate assessment, it's available at the same time to 37 attorney generals. So it's not now a question of saying, well, Attorney General of the Federation have decided that this is not, there's no point going anywhere, and then everybody is suspecting, does the Attorney General of Nigeria have an interest in this? No. So even because this is now a cynical country, and you can't blame Nigerians for being cynical. So we need to create a system that already inoculates, the institutions and the functionaries from accusation of corruption by creating a transparent system that is self-regulating.
Now, if you want to draw lessons from the famous WikiLeaks founder, and of course he's a deal right now, he's a fugitive on the run, seeking asylum in a distant land. Will that actually encourage people to even venture into this so-called business of whistleblowing?
Well, I think Nigerians are more brave than we give them credit for. The one thing we Nigerians don't want to do is to engage in futile battles, in foolish battles that don't achieve anything. If you tell a Nigerian that if I try 1, 2, 3, I have a chance at achieving X, Y, Z, they will do it. But if you ask them to do something that is so obviously futile, so obviously useless, that will not achieve any purpose, that will probably end in just anarchy. Maybe you tell them to demonstrate and they have seen 50 demonstrations achieving exactly nothing. Then people will say, what's the point? So, but the point is, if you assess the bribe code, and this is why we're asking for Nigerians to sign up at www.bribecode.org, show their support. If you can show Nigerians that this is a system that will work, then you can be sure that Nigerians are not going to sit back and say no. Because there's a difference between Nigerians and a herd of cows. If you go anywhere in Nigeria, you see cows being driven from the north to the soup pots of the south. They are beaten, they are driven through desert heat and rain. They sleep in the open. All they do is eat grass to get fat to be eaten, and they do not complain. And they see their mates being stewed as suya, they do not complain. Nigerians are not like that. This is what I believe, that all we need to do is to show this is a path that will work. And then people will stand up and say enough is enough.
All right, quickly, let's also check again your own style, your own position about the whistleblower itself, the protection, how to do it, and then the federal government's position. What are the big difference between the two?
Well, the big difference is first, originally the government said they will reward. So it is positive that they have now moved to actually saying we will reward with 2%, 2.5 to 5%. That is positive. We on our own part say the reward is 1%. There is a difference, of course. That 1% could in cases be more than the government's proposal of 5%, because it's not just 1% of a loot recovered. It is 1% of the total assets of the company that come out of liquidating that company. So when you look at the quantum, that 1% could actually be much more than the 5% offered by government. But they are both in the same direction of compensating. Right now, it's not just protecting you against oppression. It's also compensating you. Because sometimes you realize that if a whistleblower does bite the bullet and exposes corruption, he doesn't want to risk that one day an assassin will come out and So what he wants is, look, if I do this, I will get a payout that will allow me to completely change my life. If possible, leave the town in which I'm living, or even the country in which I'm living. So this is a positive development. There are similarities, but also there are differences. Also, the major difference in the two proposals is that the Bribe Code, the Whistleblowers Act proposed by government, just joins another set of wonderful laws that are in Nigeria's books, but which will not be enforced except against scapegoats. They will never be enforced against the friends, family, and members of the core of government. And that in itself is a fatal flaw. The Bribe Code's version comes together with a set of provisions that guarantees that whoever you are in this country, if you engage in serious corruption, you will be ruined. And that alone, don't forget that this law will not take retrospective effect. It will, if it is enacted today, companies have 12 months to get their house in order, so that it makes sure that anybody who is in a position to, to write a check for ₦1 million, you can reorient that person. If you feel that this person is too corrupt for your organization, you can sack him, to make sure that as a company, you are prepared for the new phase in Nigeria, which means that if you make a mistake, you pay dearly for it. And that in itself immediately moves anti-corruption enforcement from government to the private sector. It is now the private sector that will create transparent processes to make sure that nobody can give a bribe from this company. And if at the end of the day you have a corrupt functionary in government sitting on ₦1 billion in budget, and no company is ready to offer the bribe, at the end of the year you ask this company, why did you, this minister, whoever it is, why did you budget $1 billion and you didn't spend it? Do you see what I mean? And once we have taken this step, it means that Nigeria is ready for the next phase of our collective destiny. Now, don't forget that our biggest problem is bad governance. Once we do that, you find out that the people who are occupying public office now, who have been sponsored into that office by godfathers who believe that this is the easiest way to make money. So if, for instance, I want to go for governorship and they say, okay, you look like a good candidate, here's ₦10 billion, go and, buy the office. And I do that. Once I get in, my first obligation is to pay back my godfather with interest. Now, once I'm doing that, it means I'm no longer a public servant. I'm a private servant occupying a public office. So I'm seeing every public project as an opportunity to loot, whether you like it or not. Because not only must I pay back the man who put me there, who everybody knows is my godfather, I must now save a budget for the next election. And that is where Nigeria loses it. With the bribe code in force, it is impossible to make those payment backs. So within one electoral cycle, we find that our public offices are now occupied by public servants, people who are there not because they want to pay back a godfather or to loot the office, but because they want to serve. And that alone will release the private sector. People are now working because things are working in the country. And all these things we're seeing about separatism, people who want to separate. Why do you want to separate from a good country? How many times have you heard that people want to separate from America? If a country is working well, you have nationalism, because there's very little nationalism in poor countries.
Now, good example that you mentioned, Chuma. In United States, you have what you call Citizens Protection Program, especially for those who have been granted immunity. Witnesses Protection Program, because they provided maybe information or exposed a crime that is of national security importance, and they are kept somewhere protected, well taken care of, in a reserved area. Is it not appropriate for Nigeria to think about having that before we come up with this whistleblowing act?
Yes, it is. It's actually important, but what we have to also understand is that that kind of protection program works in an environment of general security. Now, it's interesting you need to have created a certain system. There's very little assurance that anybody can give you about security. For instance, you may say, look, instead of the Nigerian police force protecting me, let me protect myself. There have been cases where criminals have been accused of having rented guns from policemen and all that. So what we need to do is to get the basics right. This, what you have said, will come to pass in the fullness of time. But it is not the first stage. Because that security, there's something you have like, there's something known as overall security. Like when you have a city that is secure, you suddenly find that the walls are falling down because people feel a sense of security, that the next man is not desperate. If we have a welfare system where you have guaranteed that every child of school age must be in school, which you can only do when you have good governance. Now, you have a situation where you have guaranteed that everybody must have a square meal a day. You find that the desperation to steal is not as much. You don't need a 13-foot high wall. Maybe 6-foot high will do. And so this is what we talk about, overall security. So, and we only get that when we have good governance. So what you are talking about will come, but it's not the first stage. The first stage is let's get the basics right, which is the bribe code enforced to guarantee that We are governed by people who are governing the public interest, not in the private interest.
All right, yes, Daybreak Show, Rock City 101.9 FM in the city of Abeokuta. Citizens Forum this morning, we are looking at the Whistle Blowers Act. Well, there's Chuma Nwokolo, a lawyer, is actually the proponent of this act. Just so this could be a big business in the country. I would consider setting up one company. Because corruption is a big
Rock
business.
City FM will let you know.
No, corruption is a big business in Nigeria. So, all right, we have to take this break to allow the national news to come up at 10. After that, Chuma Nwokolo, a lawyer, will still be with us looking at that act.
Briefly, but let me be emphatic about death penalty. It will not work against individuals. People are not afraid to die, whether it is to commit armed robbery or to commit drug offenses. Every single day, you say it works in Singapore, but go online, go to YouTube, you find people who are carrying drugs into those countries, who are being arrested, who are being killed. And go to the next plane, there are people there. Now, we're not about revenge. We want a system that will transform Nigeria. The Bribe Code is that system. You need to create a system that prevents money from being stolen. And if you tell someone that if you do the next deal, I won't kill you, but you will leave a poor man, apart from being convicted and going to jail, all your assets, everything you have ever worked for, will be forfeited to government. And then the company itself that engages in a contract, after paying the supervising architect that 10 million naira to get a 1 billion naira payment, that is a company will be wound up. And that is a penalty that will work. So, and when you talk about death penalty out of a feeling of revenge, what you have to ask yourself is, who will enforce that death penalty? Is it the judges you're accusing of corruption, or the prosecutors you're accusing of corruption, or the policemen that you're accusing of corruption? Which means that if you create such a law and put it on the statute books, it will be used to witch hunt and to scapegoat the enemies of state. That is not a system we want to create. We want to create a system that makes everybody equal under the law. That's what the Bribe Code does. It means that no matter who you are, even if you are the sister of the child of the president of Nigeria, there will be an attorney general in Nigeria who will prosecute you. And there will be no telephone call. You need to make 37 telephone calls to have a chance at stopping that action. So this is the system we want under the Bribe Code, and I encourage Nigerians to support this proposal. If we do not support it, it means that the forces against corruption that are entrenched in government will be able to either water it down, neutralize it, or kill it completely. So we'll get to the National Assembly when we have enough public support.
Let's check the messages.
Okay. Let's start with this tweet from Mayor Alan 2. Morning. Sorry for drawing you back. Please, who are the whistleblowers? Because I was not around until last week. Okay. Maybe you might need to catch up with the news. We are talking about the Whistleblowing Act, where you get to report financial impropriety, mismanagement, or corrupt deeds, and then the federal government will guarantee 5%
between 2 to 5%.
Between 2 to 5%. And Ayodo says we need capital punishment for corruption and not Whistleblowers Act. Anybody found culpable should be executed. Period. All right, that's his own opinion. This one says, why was Dele killed and why was Bola Ige killed? Whistleblowing in Nigeria, I strongly doubt its workability. The government should do the needful by strengthening the anti-corruption institutions and stop chasing shadows. Agbola AAA sent in that message. Kayode's take on capital punishment is for the prime suspect to prove that he was not the one that murdered a particular whistleblower. Right and simple. Kayode Lumide sent in that one. This one's okay. Ola from Agoko, we got a message. If Julian Assange of WikiLeaks could be so persecuted and victimized for blowing whistle, it is my kind of opinion that every reasonable whistleblower in Nigeria should write his or her will before embarking on that precarious voyage, because he or she might not be alive to enjoy the 5% bounty. With due regards to Barrister Chuma Nwokolo's brilliant submissions, I strongly believe nothing much will come out of the bill. Our law books, as it stands, are not so bad. I think our problem in this country is implementation. The police and the judiciary are blameworthy. Thanks, Oloyede Ismail sent in that message. Because of our time, we can only take a final submission by Chuma Nwokolo.
Yes, the issue of it not working, I think Nigerians should, simply, be reflective, think a bit. Don't just condemn things that you have not really considered because you think it will not work. The Bribe Code is a project of over 10 years. It has been designed by legal practitioners, and it's not about wonderful laws. I agree we have wonderful laws in Nigeria. It's about putting it together. It's about creating a system. The Bribe Code does not create any new EFCC or anything, but it's about creating a system that works together to transform this country. And we should be careful of just condemning things we've not thought through or argued about or considered. So I strongly support people who are reflective to reflect on the bill and support it. Now, the issue of death penalty, I say it again and again. The simple way in which anybody, if I'm in power now, I can use that power to oppress my enemies. If that power stops short of killing people, then the situation can be transformed. And I think we must be careful about creating another tool that will simply not take us to the promised land.
So now, this act still has to go to the National Assembly.
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be passed by the National Assembly of the country.
With the opinion and impression of some Nigerians about that, let me get your own thoughts. Will it sail through?
Yeah, you see,
or what should government do to ensure that it sails through?
There are elements in the National Assembly that are sincere. I do believe that. But I think that we Nigerians should strengthen their hand. When they speak out in the assembly, look at Junai, for instance, and there is no public support for people who are doing the right things and taking risks on behalf of Nigerians, then they will be shouted down by the majority that is there for their own personal goals. And this is the reason why we must not consider this is Buhari's government or this is our government. They are there for a purpose. And if we do not tell them this is our business in that house, of course they can do their own business. So you can have legislators who are there to change the law so that what is stealing becomes legal. You have legislators who have introduced bills to make it easier to steal. And we sit down here and we keep quiet and we say this won't work and that won't work. It's our fault. And we also say that, oh, the whistleblower's law won't work because nobody wants to die. Speak for yourself. There are many Nigerians who are so courageous that they will see bullets and they will go there to get the right thing done. Don't speak for them. I agree that there are lots of cowards in Nigeria, but do not speak for bold Nigerians who meet death. Go to Sambisa Forest. There are Nigerians dying for their country. So don't say that Nigerians are cowardly. I don't accept that. Nigerians are bold, but we must show them that their boldness will come to good purpose. And that is what the Bribe Code does. It creates a system that will work. Not one that, oh, you can go and riot and demonstrate and do this and nothing will come out of it. You just change the personnel in government. Maybe bring another version of Buhari that will disappoint you after a few days. So what we want is to create a system. Even if you have a new version Sani Abacha who will steal trillions of dollars, it will not happen. Because the system has now made it impossible for people to assist him in doing that. That's all we're saying.
All right, thank you very much, Chuma Nwokolo, for honoring your invitation all the way from Lagos. We appreciate you. We wish you all the best. We want to appreciate every one of you who also sat down patiently listening to our show this morning and listening to Rock City 101.9 FM. Those who called, those who sent in their messages, and those who actually tweeted on Twitter. We appreciate every one of you. It's still in the mood of celebrating Christmas. Today is actually Boxing Day, so make sure you touch your life. Give to the less privileged. Give to those who are hungry, the widows and the orphans. That is how to actually spread the love. It's wonderful having you this morning. I am Tobi Joseph.
I am Dele Ayodo. Enjoy your day. God bless you all. God bless Nigeria.